Hi there. In today's video, I'm going to be comparing the Apple Pencil first generation to a generic digital stylus. Before we get into this, if you decide that you enjoy my content and want to see more, please click that red subscribe button down below, along with the little bell icon so that YouTube will hopefully notify you every time I upload a new video. Maybe you've been wanting to get into digital art because of all of the amazing inspiration plastered all over Instagram and Twitter, but maybe you can't afford an iPad Pro and an Apple Pencil like everyone seems to be using nowadays. If so, keep watching and hopefully you'll be able to find some alternative solutions with this information that I've gained from my own experience. All products mentioned will be linked in the description if you're interested in any of them. I'm not affiliated or sponsored by anyone, and where I ended up purchasing my iPad Pro and Apple Pencil, I will talk more about at the end of the video. Plus, I'll make some digital art for the first time, so stick around if you're interested in that. So up until recently, my devices were an iPad mini 4 and an iPhone 5S. I know they're super old models, but in all honesty, I've had both for several years now, and they are both still basically in perfect condition. My iPhone charges faster than any device I've ever owned, and I had no intention on getting a newer iPad because of how well my Mini 4 works, and the fact that I was able to purchase and download Procreate on it was a big plus. You may be wondering about this monster here, but we'll get to him later. There is also Procreate Pocket. For those who don't know, it's a mobile version of the app. Procreate is $10 US and Pocket is $5. The original stylus I've been using for things like editing thumbnails is this one. It's from the brand Mixu on Amazon. It was like $12 or $13. It has a rounded fiber tip on this end, and it's pretty nice smooth metal feel and has a pretty good weight to it. It doesn't feel cheap at all. It has a rubber grippy on it and the cap just unscrews. The cap is super important because this pen has a disc nib which seems pretty fragile. It's flexible and it does come with 2 replacement disc nibs in case you need them. The instructions tell you not to remove it. The pen will not work without the disc. And it works pretty well for what I was using it for, but when it came to drawing, it was a little difficult to know where exactly the point was when I'd place it down on the screen, and that was a little annoying. So I decided to upgrade and went back on to Amazon. Unfortunately, come to find out that Apple Pencils are very expensive, even the first generation. But I was greeted with a whole slew of unbranded digital styluses that all promised great things as a comparison to the Apple Pencil at half the price. Unfortunately, again, most of them are only compatible with iPad minis 5th generation and up. Mine's a 4. So the search continued, and eventually I did find one that was compatible with my device. Yay! So here it is. It was $30, and since it didn't feature palm rejection like all the other ones did, I also purchased some palm rejection gloves. Either I didn't read the description well enough or something, because this stylus actually ended up coming with a glove. No matter. The one it came with was actually a bit loose on my hand. I have no idea what size it is, which isn't a huge deal, I guess. I just felt like I had to keep pulling it up, and the ones that I purchased, they came in a pack of 2 for like $8, were a size small, and they were nice and snug. Some glove listings have a slide that shows which hand measurements fit which size gloves, so that was really helpful. So after playing around with this stylus for a while, here are some of the pros that I found. Also, remember that I'm using it on an iPad mini 4, and though this model has been discontinued for sale from Apple, it still gets all the new updates, but obviously it doesn't have the same processing power as newer models. Also, it does work on my iPhone, but this review is focused on the iPad. So basically, you just start by clicking this button, the on and off button. It doesn't take any Bluetooth connection or setup, you just turn it on and it automatically works on the screen. It came with a USB charging cable, and I plugged it in immediately when I got it, and it showed being fully charged after like a few hours. Of course, it did have a bit of charge when it arrived, and the cap is also magnetic, so you just pull it off to insert the cable, and then obviously this side goes to your power source. Right now I have on the rounded fiber nib on the back, but it also comes with an interchangeable end cap that's it's nothing. It's just a cap. I'm not sure why you would need this, maybe just for looks. I don't know, it seems kind of useless to me, so I just keep this fiber one on. Because this one also works on the screen, and the regular cap, it doesn't. It has a pretty nice hand feel and a decent weight. The $13 one is actually heavier, even though it's shorter. I mean, it's not bad. It doesn't feel cheap. It still feels like a nice quality. And it's magnetic, so it can somewhat hold to your iPad. The biggest pro I feel like this stylus has over the Apple Pencil is just the fact that it does work on older models of iPads. So if you have an older model of iPad like I do and you can't afford to upgrade, this is a great cheaper alternative to still be able to create digital art. Or, you know, do whatever else you'd need to do with a digital stylus, like take notes or whatever. Before I start the con list, I want to remind you that a lot of these cons stem from me just not having a compatible device, but if you have an iPad mini 5 or newer, iPad 6th generation, iPad Air 3rd generation, or the iPad Pro 11 or 12.9 inch, then some of these cons might not apply. So for the cons, just kidding. I don't want to dissuade anyone from buying one of these. If it is all you can afford and you really want to get into digital art, just find what works for you. So it was decently responsive at first. I started noticing that certain things wouldn't work right unless you held it at a straight up and down angle, like changing the size or opacity of my brush. You can see I'm holding it at a pretty natural angle to hold a pencil, I feel like, and it seems like the nib would be touching the size changing bar here, but it's marking. But if it's straight up and down, it works fine. I wasn't sure at first if this was the fault of the pen or the iPad, but I did notice that when I'd use my finger instead, it'd work fine. Also, flipping the pen around and using the fiber nib worked fine, even from an angle. Obviously, as stated before, it doesn't have palm rejection, so you kind of need the glove, unless you're really good at not letting your hand rest on the screen while you draw. I tried out both the glove that came with the stylus and the ones I purchased separately, and they both worked pretty decent, but there were a few times I think my hand was detected and it caused a mark where I didn't want it. It's working pretty good right now though, trying to make a liar out of me, I see. There are multiple settings that you can customize that don't work with the generic stylus, only the Apple Pencil. For example, I'll make a mark here. So I've got it set so that whenever I'm touching the square icon, the pen will smudge. If I take my finger off, obviously it will draw. And if you go up here to your settings and your gesture controls, so if I were to change it to this one where a finger will always smudge, it doesn't differentiate between a generic stylus and your finger. To the iPad, they're the same. This is a feature that is exclusive to the Apple Pencil. So the nib on this stylus is flat, so you don't get the feel of a traditional pencil with a point. The Apple Pencil has that pointed tip, so it's much more of a realistic drawing feel. With this nib being flat, if you have the pen tilted too far at an angle, sometimes it doesn't register your marks. Whereas with the Apple Pencil, just like with the real pencil, if you're using it directly on the tip, it'll create a hard line. But if you tilt it on its side, it can create a smoother shading effect slash larger surface area mark. You can't get that with this flat nib. There are some digital styluses that have a fine tip fiber nib, but once again, not compatible with my device. This one could probably not be considered a con if you were able to get used to it, but I noticed that whenever I would try to connect two lines, okay, what is happening? Oh, I still have it set to smudge, okay. So if I try to connect two lines, it doesn't mark right where I feel like I've put the nib. The calibration is just a bit off, even though I feel like I'm pretty close, and you could see how this would be very annoying, having to constantly go back and undo your work at the fault of the pen. There we go, there's one. And that's by holding the pen straight up and down. Then I can get it right on there. But a lot of people don't draw like that. I certainly don't draw like that. And you can't calibrate it yourself because it isn't connected to the device in any way. So it just depends on how much you're willing to pay for and settle for and get used to. I did end up getting an iPad Pro, which I will talk more about in a minute. But still using the same generic stylus, I was having the same line connecting problem as on the Mini 4. I'm not sure what happened there. It deleted itself. I'm not sure what's happening. I've got my entire hand resting on the screen, but it's completely protected by this glove, so surely it's not detecting my hand through the glove. When the line is thicker, it's less noticeable. So this is straight up and down, and then at a more natural angle. Once again, this might just be user error or something that you can get used to, but we're going to do the same test with the Apple Pencil to see how it compares. Well, I can't do it on this one because it won't work, but we will do it on the Pro. So this seems like a pretty consistent issue on both devices. So whenever I try to draw anything slowly, the line would be wavy, like noticeably. The slower I go, the worse it is. I don't know about you, but when I'm working on certain details, I have to go slow to get it exactly the way I want it. If I draw a line fast, it's much smoother. But that's just not practical for me in the way I draw. Wouldn't that be nice? There is a setting you can adjust when you choose your brush called Streamline. If you raise it up, it will somewhat smooth out the line, but it will also predict where your mark is going to go. So if I raise it up all the way, you can see when I draw a circle, it doesn't draw exactly where my pen is marked. It tries to predict where I want the line to be. So raising Streamline does somewhat smooth the lines, but if you raise it too high, it can mess with your precision, so just keep that in mind. Now I'm doing the same slow line drawing test on the iPad Pro, and I started with the Streamline all the way down. And as you can see, it's much smoother than on the Mini 4. There's still a tiny bit of wave, but it's much less noticeable. I'm drawing so slowly that I feel like any bumps are just my unsteadiness. So raising the Streamline setting does still activate predictive drawing, but it's not necessary to get smooth lines when drawing slow. Oh, and a smaller con, but I still feel like it's a con. The digital stylus is too large to fit into this iPad Pro case unless you take the cap off. But there's a place to put that too, so do with that what you will. Obviously this case was made to hold the Apple Pencil, but still. Probably the biggest con, and the reason that I did opt to get an Apple Pencil in the end, is that the generic stylus doesn't have pressure sensitivity. And what I mean by that is when you're drawing traditionally, if you press light, the mark is light and thin, you know, depending on what medium you're using, obviously, in the nib. But if you press harder, the mark gets darker and thicker. With a generic stylus, it makes the same mark no matter the pressure you use. There's no sensitivity, unlike the Apple Pencil, which we will look at next. Even though I was limited to this stylus because it was one of the only ones that was compatible with my Mini 4, I didn't see any other generic styluses for newer models that featured pressure sensitivity. I believe that is exclusive to the Apple Pencil. And now for the real star of the show. This is the Apple Pencil first generation, and I'll be demonstrating with it on the iPad Pro since it doesn't work on my other devices. So the first thing that I notice is that they both look and feel pretty much the same. I can barely tell, but it does feel like the Apple Pencil is a hair heavier, maybe 2 hairs. You can see that the digital stylus is a bit longer, and obviously the Apple Pencil does fit in the slot with its cap on. So there's no on-off button. You connect it through Bluetooth by plugging it into your iPad, where it can also be charged. If you buy them new, they come with a female to female connector so that you can charge it with an Apple cable. But since I bought mine used, I can still buy one separately if I want to. but you don't really need it though. As long as your iPad's charged, you can just use it to charge the pencil, which is awesome. So once it's connected through Bluetooth, it stays connected even when your Bluetooth is off. So Google says that when the iPad is asleep, so is the pencil. So there's that. The pressure sensitivity is apparent right away. Barely touching it to the screen makes a very light mark, and pressing harder makes it darker. Even at this extreme angle, the pen still works on the size changer. Like, you don't even really have to try, unlike the other one where it had to be straight up and down to really work. For the slow line test, I'm starting with the streamline all the way down, and there is a tiny bit of wave. Not near as noticeable as the first pen though. Now let's raise the streamline up to 10%. The waves are happening much slower, and I'll hardly put any pressure so you can see how light the line is. I press down harder. Look at that. So obviously quick lines will be nice and smooth. Circles nice and smooth. Let's turn the streamline all the way up to the max. That's pretty great. There is the tiniest bit of wave, but it's night and day compared to the other stylus. With the circle test, it's still predicting where I'm going to draw, so you do have to bring it out and around to get it right. But if you draw a circle and don't pick your pen up, it'll create a perfect circle anyway, so yeah. This is what I meant earlier by using the side of the pencil. You get a shading type of effect. One thing I will say that I was surprised and even a little annoyed by was that when using the eraser tool, even if the opacity is all the way up, you have to press fairly hard to get it to erase completely, unless you just lightly erase continuously until it's gone. Unlike the digital stylus, where since there's no sensitivity, you don't have to press hard to erase. Maybe this is something that you can adjust in a setting somewhere that I'm just not familiar with yet, but I found it kind of strange. Now I'm going to do the same drawing with each stylus. The first one is done with the generic stylus, and I'm putting the screen cap on with each respective drawing so that you can get a better view of what's going on, and the Apple Pencil drawing will be after this one. So I ended up purchasing the Apple iPad Pro 9.7 inch, it's a first generation, on eBay, refurbished from manufacturer. The storage capacity is 32 gigs, and it was $225. I was able to choose my storage capacity, color, and the condition it was in. If you're not familiar with eBay, depending on what options you choose, it changes how much you pay for it. And there are seller refurbished devices for better prices, but they usually have like cracks on the glass but not the screen, or be slightly bent, or like the sound doesn't work, or have like a line on the LCD, which I read can actually affect the like precision of a stylus or pencil. So I opted for something a little bit higher price and better quality. This one I chose was in excellent condition, and it was said to have some possible minor scratches on the surface or exterior, but still be in perfect working condition. And there is one or two tiny hair-like scratches on the screen, but they're only noticeable if the screen is off and you hold it at an angle in the light. And I have a tempered glass screen protector on it, so it doesn't affect my pencil. The Apple Pencil I purchased was also from eBay, and I got it used for $55 and $5 shipping. New, they run about $80 on eBay and $95 on Amazon. And so far mine works great, and I'm really happy with my purchase. What I was really happy about was that I initially purchased Procreate on my Mini 4, but I was able to re-download it for free on my iPad Pro through my iCloud account. So here's something I wasn't anticipating. When drawing the eyelashes with the generic stylus, the brush I was using would be thick at first and then it would taper nicely, like an eyelash would. But using that same brush with the Apple Pencil, it's actually up to me to control the pressure to make that same effect, which is not easy. It took a lot more effort and messing around with settings to finally get it figured out, and I'm pretty sure I've already forgotten how to do it by now, but I'm sure it's something that I'll get used to. It just surprised me that there would be something made easier by using the cheaper product. Let me know in the comments whether you prefer traditional or digital art, or maybe if you do them interchangeably. If you were thinking about going digital, I hope this video helped in some way as far as, talking about the different ways that styluses can be used on different devices. I will still definitely be doing traditional. I love watercolor and pencils, and I just got me some Arches watercolor paper. So stay tuned to my channel for some digital art videos along with traditional art. Okay, thanks guys, bye!